Oh, that's right, this stuff. In Minecraft 1.21, we're all going to want to be taking the automation of our kelp farms to the next level. This is all because of the dried kelp block, an amazing source of fuel that you can get from kelp, a very easy to farm material. The one downside of this amazing fuel source is that you have to craft it manually, of course. This is how I used to do it back in the day. We would scooch all of the dried kelp over to a single spot and craft it in a crafting bench. Of course, the next step is then to get your dried kelp blocks back into your furnaces, or smokers in this case. But this is 1.21, and now we have the crafter block to automate this process. I'm sure many of you have had this idea, but today I got a contraption that does this in a really smart way. It is tileable and self-sustaining. Because it fits in a 1-block slice, it means you can scale the farm up to meet your needs. And so the contraption I have here simply needs to be hooked up to your kelp farm, and it will then take care of everything and give you an output of dried kelp blocks. And because the smokers are constantly turning the kelp into dried kelp, this will also accumulate XP inside of these smokers. This is something we'll come back to later on in this video. For now though, we are going to jump straight into the tutorial. And this is kind of it. You can basically pause the video and all the information you need for building this contraption is there. So there is no consequence for what order you build these blocks in. The only information you can't see is how this hopper here is configured. It simply has 4 blocker items inside so that you don't have to store as much dried kelp. And here are the materials that you'll need to build a single slice of this contraption. The moss blocks are simply a material to fill the composter up to its highest level. I'd also like to shout out Vanilla Tweaks for these amazing textures that let you know what direction the droppers and the observers are facing in, as well as the power of the redstone line here. So let's get into how this farm works. We're going to start at the top with the hopper and the composter. This is simply here just to optimize the performance of the hopper. You will have your kelp coming from your kelp farm running through these hoppers, and if you're going to build these slices side by side, you can see how they tile together and the kelp can flow through and go down into the smoker. And you don't have to use a line of hoppers here. This is just how I've built the contraption. You could have an ice water stream going across the front of this thing and deliver the items into the hopper that way. Now, once the smoker has turned some kelp into dried kelp, it's going to get funneled down here into the crafter. When it has its 9th piece inside, the signal strength of this redstone here will change from 8 to 9, which gets picked up by the observers. So this is why we have a composter here that's filled up, so that it keeps that at signal strength 8, and then when this thing reaches 9 items, it will then change the state of this redstone wire, and this can actually be tiled side by side as it's never going to affect the next piece of redstone wire. So you can see from the direction of the observers that it's going to power the crafter, and this will turn it into a dried kelp block. The observers above then power this dropper in the middle, which powers the one above and below, and because the crafter has put the dried kelp block into this dropper, it will get shot all the way up the top and across into this hopper, which points to our output. But below it, we have the hopper here that can pick up the dried kelp blocks and feed them back into the smoker. So at the end of your contraption, you would have a chest here for collecting your dried kelp blocks, and it's only when the hopper below is filled up that it then won't take the dried kelp block from the hopper here and feed it through the train down to the end. Now, this contraption does have one flaw that turns out to not really be an issue. Because we power this dropper directly from this observer, it powers the ones on either side as well. This occasionally causes a dried kelp block to get stuck inside, but because this gets powered frequently, it'll simply move them along and up into the hopper at some point. And so if a dried kelp block does get stuck inside of one of those droppers, it won't be long before it's moved out into the hopper chain above. Now, there is more to learn about this contraption. Because we are smelting items, each of these smokers is actually accumulating XP. So if we go ahead and power one of these, the contraption can continue to work. However, you'll accumulate an item in here, and when you take it out, then you're going to get a bunch of XP. This one got me 6 whole levels. And according to my math, for every minute that 12 of these contraptions are running, you would get 14.4 EXP, which is not a lot. And that's because it takes 10 kelp for 1 experience point. Now, you might be wondering, why is this array here 12 wide? That is because we are throttled by the input when we are using hoppers to distribute the kelp into the smokers. So 2.5 items get moved every second. and one item is smelted in 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds, 12.5 items can be moved through the hopper chain, meaning that we're going to have a maximum of 12 smokers. So if you wanted to use hoppers and you produced an insane amount of kelp, you would need to distribute it over to the next point here and then have another array of 12. Or like I mentioned earlier, you could use ice and water to distribute the items into the hoppers below. Then you wouldn't be limited to 12 in a section at once. So that was the input. Let's talk about the output. This thing produces dried kelp blocks, and in a minute it will create 8 and 8/10 of a dried kelp block. And I should note that that is for a section of 12 of them like we have behind me here. Last of all in this video, I'd like to give a shout out to Cubehamster, who's been playing on my redstone server here and introduced me to this really cool mechanic where you keep the redstone level at one level and wait for it to tick over to the next. That's what made this farm possible with the design it has, and Cube was also the one who inspired me to take a look at doing something with the dried kelp, as he had come up with a really cool contraption of his own. And you can see a preview of this dried kelp farm over on Cubehamster's Twitter. And as we're recording this video, he's yet to upload it to his channel, but he has published a new redstone contraption, an automatic pumpkin pie factory. You should definitely go check it out. I will link to his channel in the description box down below, and if you're going to stick around, there's a bonus derp for you at the end of this video. But before I wrap it up, I just want to say subscribe if you're looking for more Minecraft contraptions. I got a couple more to show you, and leave a like if you want to support the video. So thanks for watching. Let's check out this silly mistake I made earlier. And I would also like to declare that I'm currently playing in 1.21, and I have absolutely no idea how these trapdoors are in this world save. The copper grate is here too. This is absolutely baffling. Oh well, apparently it's black stained glass. Ah, now that makes sense. Now that makes sense. Okay, so that bit gets cut. We don't have to mention that. Whoops.